In 2003, there was a definable winning mentality. How important is that the mental aspect of performance and preparation?
I think with 2003, we knew we was a good side. It was actually very much, how could we make us that 1, 2, 5% better? And a lot of it was driven by the players. We wanted to be the best in the world. And fair play to England at that time, and Clive was in charge at that moment in time. We got everything we wanted. A little bit like what Mike said up on the stage earlier was, we got everything we required, and that helped us turn from what was most probably a good England side to a great England side. We wanted to improve in little areas all the time. 1% here, 2% there, 3% there. And all of a sudden we started getting better and better.
Yeah. A lot is made of the Woodward approach. Was Woodward a fantastic motivator, or did he bring something else to England rugby?
Well, especially that Clive's been in the papers at the moment, it's quite apt to say that. What Clive was, and I always say this about Clive, that he was never a coach. He was never a coach because we had world-class coaches. We had Andy Robinson, we had Brian Ashton at the time, we had the best kicking coach, the best defensive coach in the world. So he was never a coach. Was he the best manager? Well, actually, he didn't manage us at all. We as a group of players managed us. If someone stepped out of line, we actually took control of that and said, you're out of order, and we put that in place. Was he a motivator? Well, that group of players were most probably the most motivated group of players you'll ever meet. So what was Clive's role in that team? What he was the architect, if you like, of creating a high-performance environment, I would say. So literally we could go out and train and play to the best of our abilities. He created that, and he did it so well. I think we've not really seen the like for England since, really.
Yeah. And when you're going into a major tournament such as the World Cup, how much does it come down to that, just that mental attitude?
It was very important. I think we cracked that mental side of it before the World Cup when we actually played in New Zealand and Australia on tour. That was when I thought, and a lot of the other players felt, that we come together as a team where we beat New Zealand in Wellington with only 13 men on the field, 6 men in a scrum because we had Lawrence Dallaglio and Neil Back sent to the sin bin, and New Zealand couldn't push us over for a try. And then the following week going to Australia and absolutely taking Australia to pieces, where they said, you're boring, you don't score tries, and I think we scored 6 tries against them that day, and we beat them by 40-odd points. I think that was when we knew as a side we could go out and win the World Cup in 2003.
Now, you made your England debut back in 1990, the youngest ever prop to play for England. You were playing alongside people like Wade Dooley, people like Peter Wheeler. What sort of advice did they give this raw international back in 1990? My first tour for England was in Argentina. We was the first English side to tour Argentina after the Falklands. So we wasn't that well liked. What was the best advice they gave me? Most probably duck would be the best one. No, it was a very hard tour. What these guys said really was, you just concentrate on your job, we'll look after everything else. Because at 21 years of age, you panic about your own performance. Did I do that right? Was I wrong doing this? And they said, look, don't worry about it. If you make a mistake, forget about it. You can't do anything about a mistake. It's happened. It's in the past. So just get on with your game. You look after your game, we'll look after everything else. And that's basically how I was brought into the England team. Now, some pretty hard men in that team. I mean, who were the hard cases?
Well, you said one straight away. I mean, someone like a Wade Dooley, it's when you're 6'8" and you weigh sort of 19, 20 stone, and you're a policeman, you're a natural born thug, to be quite honest. But we was lucky, I think, in those days that the game was different, where England had such a side and we had such
hard men, actually we didn't need the ball. The ball was secondary in rugby to us. It was, we could actually have a fight for 80 minutes, to be quite honest. But when you see these guys close up and you appreciate how hard they actually are and how uncompromising they are, as in, this is how you play rugby, believe me, that's a real baptism of fire as such.
Now, you mentioned that Wade Dooley was a policeman at the same time. I mean, because this was the amateur era of rugby. You were working, I think you were working in construction at that stage. How different is the world of rugby today than it was when you kicked off 20 years ago?
I think we are slightly worried about the younger generation coming through, because when I first started playing rugby, full stop, it was amateur. And when you started playing for England, it was amateur again. You didn't actually get paid. Nowadays, a lot of the younger players, that's all they know. They've come straight out of school, straight into an academy, straight into a rugby club. They don't know what the real world's about. They actually live a little bit in a bubble. And we are, as in the older players, are slightly worried we're starting to create a small bubble-like football. And we want our rugby players to keep their feet firmly on the ground. We want them to be honest, and we want them to be humble. And we've got to make sure that we work hard at doing that.
Now, I presume that the players though today are fitter, they are bigger, they're faster. I mean, they're much more athletes now than maybe rugby players. Would that be the case?
Was that directed straight at me? Yes. These guys now are athletes. If you have a look at what they can actually do in the gym now, it's amazing. But you've got to make sure you get that balance. You've still got to get that balance. What you do in the gym and what you do on the field on a Saturday afternoon. Actually, it doesn't matter what you do in the gym. What's the most important training session of your week is how you perform on a Saturday for 80 minutes. And sometimes you do see these guys now, they're great in the gym, they're very fit, they're very fast, but do they play better than us as we did on a Saturday afternoon for 80 minutes? That's a debate at this moment in time.
Now, 114 caps is a remarkable achievement, all more remarkable the fact that you're playing in the front row. Can you give us some insight in terms of what it's like being on the coalface of rugby?
Oh, I remember asking years ago, years before me, Bobby Windsor, the great Welsh hooker and British Lions hooker. And there was a match once, and I always remember watching this match as a kid, and the two front rows come up and they started swinging and fighting and all this. And I remember saying it, this is years after the fact. I just said, look, Bobby, I've got to ask, what happened there? And he said, it was nothing. It was nothing. And you're thinking, it wasn't nothing. If that was on the street, everyone would get done for GBH. It was, that was not nothing. And he said, the opposite number is a good friend of mine, Alan Phillips. He sort of give me a little nip on the cheek here. I turn round and give his ear a bit of a nip, and the front row come up like that. Fine. And he said, to be quite honest, what's a nip between friends? But that's changed now. That's not there anymore, I'm glad to say.
So who's the hardest player you've played against?
The hardest player? Easy. It's only one man. People who know their rugby, it was a guy called Norman Hadley, who was a Canadian second row, captain of Canada. Must have been at least 6'8", 6'9", and he would have weighed in at roughly about 22 stone. And he was a nasty piece of work. He had a scar all the way down his cheek. And I know he didn't get that from rugby. I know that for a fact. And I come across Norman in an England-Canada game at Wembley in 1993. I didn't know at the time, but there was a Canadian stamping on an England player. So I've come in and I've thrown what I thought was the best left uppercut I've ever thrown in my life. I've hit this guy. He's jackknifed out of the ruck. But as I've hit him, I've actually felt my knuckles just crack. And I've actually double dislocated my middle finger. But not with one knuckle, with two knuckles. So all of a sudden now I'm in the middle of the pitch at Wembley on a lovely sunny day, and I'm trying to straighten out my finger to get the dislocation back in place. And all of a sudden I look round and I actually see I'm in shade. And I'm thinking, how the hell can I be in shade? I'm in the middle of the pitch at Wembley, and all of a sudden I see a pair of boots, socks, shorts, shirt, Norman Hadley. And he's got this lump coming out from in between his eyes. And it was like a cartoon sketch. It was like, whoop, it's coming out that quick. And I've never felt fear that many times. I've got to say that, I've been quite lucky. And even then I wasn't scared. I was scared when he said, "Is that the best you got, Princess?" I'll say that.